Insurance isn't one size fits all, and shopping for it shouldn't feel like squeezing into something that just doesn't fit. That's why drivers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they show you options that fit your budget. Enough hunting for discounts, trying to calculate rates, and tinkering with coverages. Maybe you're picking out your very first policy, or maybe you're just looking for something that works better for you and your family. Either way, they make it simple to see your options. No guesswork, no surprises. Ready to see how easy and fun shopping for car insurance can be? Visit progressive.com and give the Name Your Price tool a try. Take the stress out of shopping and find coverage that fits your life on your terms. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
So welcome to Vulgar History, a feminist women's history comedy podcast. My name is Anne Foster, and all season long we've been talking about the Regency Era. We've been mostly talking about England in the early 1800s. It's a time period that's best known now, I think, still for the works of Jane Austen. That's when she was living, that's when she was writing. And today I'm going to talk about the legacy of Jane Austen and why we still find her books so captivating today. And I'm joined by big Jane Austen fan. It's author June Hur. Welcome, June.
Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. First of all, I mean, the timing of this is because your new book is just coming out when this episode comes out. Like, it just came out yesterday. It's out this week. Behind Five Willows, which is what's described on your website as a warm and romantic homage to Jane Austen set in historical Korea. So the Jane Austen vibes are strong in this book, but could you explain how you first encountered Jane Austen and what she means to you?
So when I was 13, I was struggling in English class, not because I was like new to Canada or anything. I arrived in Canada when I was in kindergarten. By that time, I was in Canada for a while. I just thought books were really boring. And so books were boring. I thought writing was boring. And so I struggled. And my grades weren't great. And so my dad started to get really concerned. And he was like, June, like, if you fell in love with books, I think you'd do really good in English class. And my dad just loves books in general. And so every now and then he would buy me a book or he'd borrow a book from me and bring it home. And nothing would really spark my interest. And then one day he brought home Pride and Prejudice. And this kind of coincided with my dad also watching the black and white version of Pride and Prejudice. I forget which adaptation that was, but it was like 19 something.
The like 1950s-ish one, the one with Laurence Olivier.
Yes. Yeah. I watched it and I just like, I don't know, it just like rewired my brain. And when I began reading Pride and Prejudice, like I finally understood what the joy of reading meant. Like I felt like I was being swept away into another country, another era. And it was my first encounter with enemies to lovers as well. Not that Darcy and Elizabeth are like, extreme enemies to lovers, but I feel like a lot of that trope kind of traces back to our love of Darcy and Elizabeth. And so, yeah, I just fell in love with Pride and Prejudice. And then from there, I began to borrow all the VHS adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, the 1995 adaptation. And that's when I just became obsessed.
This is like the Colin Firth adaptation.
Yes. That became my obsession. I'd print out pictures of Colin Firth and I'd stick his face on my journal. Yeah. So from there, I began to read all of Austen's works. And while I was working on my book, I was trying to go back to those days and try to understand what it was about Austen that so captured my heart and my imagination. Because there are so many love stories out there, so many great love stories, but why Austen particularly? And I think it felt so charming and witty, but also cozy. And it felt like a safe space where like you kind of know that there will be a happily ever after. Of course, like that's why I think when I read Mansfield Park, I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, this is not the Austen I know. But yeah, for her other works, I went in there and knew that there would be a happily ever after. Things would work out. So yeah, I think Austen was my first introduction into romance, even though her books are way more than romance itself. But as a 13-year-old girl, that was like my first taste of like what a love story looks like. So that was Austen for me.
What I think she's so good at, especially in Pride and Prejudice, and this is something that gets me in your book and several of your books, but other books too, where people fall for each other, but they don't realize they have.
Yeah.
But you as the reader, you have an inkling. I think you like him, but she doesn't understand her own emotions. And Jane Austen is really good at that, I think.
She is. It's like when Darcy was like, oh, Elizabeth Bennet has pretty eyes, but I better not fall for her. I'm like, I think you already did fall for her.
Yeah. No, exactly. It's like people think they can command their emotions based on logic and reason, and they cannot. And so I know from, I think it's just in this book, in the year afterward, you talk about, you wrote fan fiction as well. Can you talk about that?
Yes. So I was so obsessed to the point where like I didn't know what to do with myself. I was just like, I need more Pride and Prejudice. So I read all the sequels and retellings I could find in the library, and then it still wasn't enough. So I just took all of my dad's recycled thesis paper and I began writing fan fiction of Pride and Prejudice.
Did you know what fan fiction was at this point, or did you feel like you were just inventing it yourself?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was. I was just like, I want to create my own Darcy Elizabeth Bennet love story. And I was like, okay, they got together in the end of the original book, but I'm like, now I need to separate them and make it even more angsty. And so in the fan fiction I wrote as a 13-year-old with close to zero understanding of British history, I turned Darcy into a spy for Napoleon. And then Elizabeth Bennet was a spy for Queen Elizabeth. And so they were like doomed lovers. So yeah, that was my fan fiction. And it was like over 300 pages long.
I just relate to this so hard because I think we're a similar age, both growing up in Canada. When I saw the first Interview with a Vampire movie, I was just like, I want to know more about Claudia, the child vampire. There's nothing. I'll write a book about it. And this is like pre me being on the internet, like I didn't know that fan fiction was a thing, but I had the same feeling where I was just like, I need to sit with this character. I need to sit with this experience. I guess I'll write it myself. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I love that just fan fiction existed even before the internet era. It's just us wanting to like live in that world as long as we can.
And I think Jane Austen, I mean, goodness knows. So I traveled to London a few months ago, and I went to Bath, where there's the Jane Austen Center, which I don't know if you've been there, but it's like...
I've been there. I went there last year.
Okay, yeah. Did you do the whole experience? You can like put on like a Regency Era outfit, turn around and drink tea. Yeah, no, exactly. And like Jane Austen like has such devoted passion. Like so many people have a similar story to you, I think, where it's like they read the book and they're like, I want to live in this world. I want to expand this world, like Colin Firth poster on my wall. Like something about these books. And I think my theory, having done this series about the Regency Era, and just thinking like it's such a specific brief time in history, like English history for like a decade, but why do people still love it? And I think it happens to be when Jane Austen wrote her books. And people love Jane Austen, so they just expand that outwards to be like, well, I love the Regency. Like, what other books are set? It's like, if it's not fan fiction of Jane Austen, it's like, but it's other people in that same era. It's other people doing the same sort of thing. Like, what have you engaged? You said that you read like as a younger person, that there's so many Pride and Prejudice sequels or prequels.
Yes.
Like, and there's never, every month, there's new ones coming out. Like, people just want to expand on that world.
I found Georgette Heyer.
There you go. Yeah.
Yes. She follows, her writing style is very Jane Austen-esque, I found. And it's all about wit and banter. And then towards the end, it's like, there's a lot of comedy in it too. Some other Georgette Heyer books are a bit like weightier, but her romance are still like in the vein of Jane Austen, where it's still like a comedy of manners at the end of the day.
someone else who I spoke to in the course of doing this podcast season said like Georgette Hare, they felt that was the heir to Jane Austen. And I think a lot of people don't know those books because they're a bit older, and they're thought of as kind of like romance. There's kind of romance novels, and Jane Austen books are not really considered romance novels. They're more just kind of like comedy of manners, fiction. And Georgette Hare, I think, sits in that same sort of neighborhood.
Yes, I agree.
So you have this passion for Jane Austen novels, for Jane Austen. You studied her in university, or you took a course in it as well, right?
Yes. There was a seminar on Jane Austen. It was a year long. And the moment I knew it existed, I was just like, I'm signing up for it. I always looked forward to that course. Our syllabus was just like pure joy to me. Like we'd read and analyze Pride and Prejudice and other Austen works. And I remember things got so heated when the professor decided to add Pride and Prejudice and the zombies into our syllabus.
Oh,
we're like, oh, this book, it's like they're profiting off of Austen's work because it's not copyrighted anymore. I'm like, and we were just like, yeah, we were like up in arms. But it was fun that all of us were so passionate about Austen's work. And one of my fondest memories is when my professor was like, which adaptation is superior? The 2005 adaptation or the 1995 adaptation? And the room like just broke into an uproar. And again, that's what I loved about that seminar so much. It's because the shared passion, so many opinionated people, because it's something we love and cherish. And so, yeah, I think that seminar really deepened my love and appreciation for Austen. I wish I knew where my notes were, because when I was working on my book, I really wanted to go back and see like what it was exactly that we were, talking about, but I can't find it because it was so long ago.
What do you think? And it's okay if you don't have an answer, but like, what are your thoughts? Like, what's the secret, like, magic ingredient that makes Jane Austen's books make people such fans, like lifetime fans? Like, you read so many people of the same story. Like, they read Pride and Prejudice. Usually, that's people's first one they read, and then it's okay for the rest of our lives.
Yeah,
like I will be devoted to this. She has such a small body of work. Each book is different, but it's all still her work. The adaptation of the other Bennett sisters just coming out of North America, people are so excited to engage with her work. Like, what do you think? What's the like magic elixir of Jane
Austen? So hard. Like, this is exactly the question I was wrestling to death when I was working on it, because I was just like, I want to capture what it was that I felt and what people feel while reading Austen, and like somehow, like, incorporate it into my work. But I'm like, I just don't know. Like, I feel like it's a combination of the fact that it is still a comedy of manners, so it's a bit more lighthearted. It is like what we would call like something a bit more cozy, and then combined with the era, the Regency era, where there are so many rules in play, whether they follow the rules or not. Who knows if they did, but it does have a lot of rules. And there was so much hypocrisy in that era because they, put so much emphasis on respectability. And so I feel like it was just such a fun time to, like, it makes us think that it was such a fun time to live in. And combined with the fashion and the etiquette, yeah, I think it just all combines into a work that is so different from the era we're living in right now. And so I think that contrast is what we find a lot of fascination in. And then combined with like two very excellent adaptations, I feel like that's what really keeps the love alive as well. I almost wonder if it was just the book and if we had no really good adaptations, I'm sure there would still be intense Pride and Prejudice lovers. But I wonder what it would have looked like if we didn't have those very iconic series and film.
And that's such a good point, because I wonder, like, again, like the Jane Austen Center in Bath, everybody, if you're a fan, you should totally go. But even just looking around the gift shop,
It's all Colin Firth's face.
Colin Firth. It's like, and there's been other adaptations. Like there's the 2005. It's not Matthew McFadden. Like it's Colin Firth. It's like, I got like, my sister's such a fan. I got her like, she won't listen to this. I got her like a Colin Firth magnet and like a card and like all these things. There's something really seminal about that 1995 adaptation that I think just really bumped Pride and Prejudice, especially. Yes. And then along with it, all of Jane Austen's work just into kind of this new level of fandom. I think of like, you know, there's again Bath, but they have like Jane Austen days where everybody like parades around and they're dressed up and people visit filming sites. Like my sister visited, I forget the name of the house, but where Pemberley was. Like,
oh my gosh.
Like it's a combination of the book that's been popular ever since it was published. And then it just elevated with these, you're right, the adaptations were so crucial to that too. I found it really interesting and really charming when I've been doing my research on the Regency era to read about people back then who loved these books. Like,
wow.
Like to know that, that's another thing too, like they're old books, like they're over 200 years old, but they're short. So maybe it's not as intimidating as reading Charles Dickens or something, but they're still approachable. Like I was reading about Princess Charlotte from the Regency era, and she was such a Jane Austen fan. And when the new book came out, she would get it. Oh, and it's like, and she's a teenage girl. And you were a teenage girl. It's like, girl.
That's really heartwarming. Like to know that there were fans, even in Austen's era, that fans have existed for hundreds of years. That's like, wow.
It was really sweet. In one of her journals, Princess Charlotte wrote, she's like, I'm reading Sense and Sensibility. She's like, I am Marianne. Like,
oh my gosh. My heart.
It's right.
No,
it's just like
really sweet.
It makes the people from back then feel more relatable, but it also makes that this book still connects to people in the 20th century, in the 21st century.
I wonder if people back then also wrote Pride and Prejudice fan fiction.
I bet they did.
Yeah.
They're just like, I need to know more. I need to know more of this story.
With their quill pen writing.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm really curious to know, like, so you're going from this Jane Austen super fan, who you still are, and then you become an author, and your first 5 books are all murder mysteries.
Yes.
So did you at first think, I'm going to write Jane Austen-esque books? And then at what point did that pivot into murder mysteries?
So I began with Jane Austen-esque books. I wrote Regency romance for most of my 20s. And I tried to get those published, but it wasn't working out. Like I got rejections after rejections. And so I think my confidence in writing romance kind of got shaky. And so I'm like, you know what, let's write British women's fiction. So I shifted into the Victorian era and I started writing a bit more darker things, exploring the lives of women in the Victorian era. And this coincided with like my time at the University of Toronto, where I was studying British history. So I took inspiration from what I was learning. And I was like, okay, maybe I'm not good at writing romance. Maybe I should try to write something more serious. But it was still set in 19th century England. And then when that book didn't work out, by this time around, a decade had passed where I'm trying to get published. My British historicals published and nothing is happening. And so I got so discouraged, so burnt out. And for a year, I was convinced that I would stop writing. So I tried venturing into other career paths. But towards the end of the year, I started that yearning to tell stories again returned. And I did consider writing about British history again. But I think whenever I tried to approach British history, I was just reminded of all the rejections. And I was like, you know what? I want to start a new chapter in my writing career and write about a different history. And Korean history was actually the last at the bottom of my consideration. Like I did not think I would be interested in Korean history. But then after studying different world histories, I was like, I'm Korean. I should probably look into Korean history a bit. And then the moment I picked up this kind of overview of 19th century Korea. And I remember falling so madly in love. Like my hands were shaking and I was like sweating. And I'd never felt like this before about history. I thought I'd never love history more than British history, but I fell so deeply in love with Korean history. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to write a book set in Korea's past. I didn't think by this point, I'm like, yeah, I'm not good at writing romance. I want to be taken seriously. I want to get published. And I thought, if I want to get published, I should write something dark and serious. And besides history, I'm also obsessed with crime thrillers on TV. And I also really enjoyed the work of Tanner French. And so I was like, let me try to write a mystery, because I really felt like I was approaching Korean history, as someone who actually knew very little about Korean history because I didn't grow up learning about it. And so I found that Korean history itself was like a mystery. And so I was like, let me use mystery as the mystery plot as a vehicle to explore history a bit more. And so that's kind of how I ended up writing Korean murder mysteries. But then throughout that time, I remember like always really missing the world of Austen and Regency England, but I never really knew how to like resolve that tension where it's like, I'm so in love with Korean history, but I really miss Austen. And so I was like stuck in that tension for so many years.
I do want to just mention, if there's people listening who haven't read your previous books, like there are some really good love stories in those mysteries.
Yes. With The Red Palace, that was my first attempt at returning to romance again. And I think that reminded me again that I actually really love writing romance, but I kept it as a subplot, a very thin subplot. And then I think with every book, like my confidence to try and write a more fleshed out romance is kind of returning.
I feel like if someone could just look at your books in a store or on your website, where it's like the covers kind of start having a man and a woman on them. At first it's just a woman, and then it's a man and a woman. You're like, okay.
Exactly.
The subplot is becoming more part of the plot in this book. So now this is your first published book that's not also, there's not a dead body. Well, there's not a murder mystery in this book. So what were you at first tempted to be like, okay, I'm going to do a Pride and Prejudice retelling, but I have to make it a murder mystery because that's my brand. Like, was that where you started with?
This is so funny because I initially pitched this book to my editor as I was just like, I sent her an all cap email. I'm like, oh, what about Pride and Prejudice and murder? And she was like, she's like, June, I thought you wanted to try something new. And I was like, oh, and so she strongly asked me to reconsider the murder aspect. And she was like, would you consider writing like a pure, like a straight up romance book? And I remember when I saw her response, I was so stressed because I'm like, I don't think I'm capable of writing romance with no dead bodies in it. But yeah, in the end, I was just like, no, she's right. I did tell her I wanted to challenge myself and step out of my comfort zone a bit.
And now for a quick advertising break. Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Looking to see what's happening around your home? Ring's battery doorbell helps you track packages and see who's at your door in real time. The Outdoor Cam Plus protects your yard at night with a wide field of view and clearer Retinal 2K video. Or upgrade to 4K cameras and doorbells with Retinal Vision for ultra-clear zoom and detail. Your door, your yard, your home. With Ring, it's protected. Shop cameras, doorbells, and more at ring.com now.
The war is over, and both sides lost. Kingdoms were reduced to cinders, and armies scattered like bones in the dust. Now the survivors claw to what's left of a broken world, praying the darkness chooses someone else tonight. But in the Shadow Dark, the darkness always wins. This is old school adventuring at its most cruel. Your torch ticks down in real time, and when that flame dies, something else rises to finish the job. This is a brutal rules-light nightmare with a story that emerges organically based on the decisions that the characters make. This is what it felt like to play RPGs in the 80s, and man, it is so good to be back. Join the Glass Cannon podcast as we plunge into the Shadow Dark every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern on youtube.com/theglasscannon with the podcast version dropping the next day. See what everybody's talking about and join us in the dark.
Welcome to the realms of peril and glory. Explore the mechanically magical vistas of Vale, the paranormal mysteries of liminal London, and the cyberpunk chaos of Cyborg. Be awed by our incredible guests from familiar shows like Oxventure and No Rolls Barred. Search Realms of Peril and Glory to find out more.
And we're back. And I love that it's sort of like it's still talking about historical Korea. So it's still very much like a June Hur book of people like your other books. I like this one too. There's just not dead bodies this time. And so we were talking a bit about this before we started recording. And I think that it's so interesting to take like this Regency era novel that is about, as presented in the novel, a culture with, like you said, all these rules and expectations, and men and women and the expectations of getting married, and then putting it into a context which is historical Korea, the Joseon era, where actually like the rules were even more strict. And they actually were followed in a way we've talked about on my podcast in the Regency episodes. Like there were these rules in the Regency era, but like so many people had mistresses and illegitimate children, and like it wasn't as strictly enforced as some people might imagine. But the era you're talking about, which is like 1793, Joseon era, it's like these rules are like so strict. Can you explain kind of what was happening there at that time?
So during this period of time, Confucianism had a strong influence over the Joseon dynasty. It was basically a state belief that was enforced. And during this time, women were seen as, like the idea of it's basically purity culture. Like women were expected to stay chaste, to stay pure, and they were expected to become obedient mothers. And there's like this concept that a woman is raised to become a mother, first a good daughter to their father, and then a good wife to their husband. And then when their husband passes away, basically a good mother to the son. And so it's this idea of obedience. And there was a lot of expectations on women back then. And it's interesting because the expectations were a bit different on men. The idea that they were still expected to be respectable, but they actually had mistresses too, because the rich nobles, they would have concubines and illegitimate children. But I think women, compared to the Regency era, like even in the Regency era, like respectable women, there was a lot of expectation placed on them. But women in Joseon era, it almost felt like how women were seen in the Victorian era. You know, the concept of the angel in the house. Joseon Korean women were basically expected to be angels. And this was more for upper class women. I feel like expectations were a bit lower for lower class, like commoners. But for the aristocrats, there was high expectations for women. You could see that expectation in the structure of houses. The houses would have something called this outer residence for men, and then women would be confined within the inner residence. And that the gate into the women's quarter would always be locked at night. So women weren't allowed to like roam freely. And if they did leave the house, they were expected to cover themselves or travel by palanquin. So yeah, it's this idea that they're not supposed to be, quote unquote, like sullied. Their reputation was expected to stay pristine. And the contrast, I feel like, with the Regency era and the Joseon dynasty is if a woman is ruined in Regency England, it's almost like she was kind of outcasted. I'm sure there are more severe cases, but in the case of Joseon dynasty Korea, there were a lot of cases of women just being killed, honor killing basically. So the stakes are a bit more higher in the Joseon period, and specifically the latter half of the Joseon dynasty, so the 19th century around then. Yeah, women were treated a bit more freely earlier on in the dynasty as opposed to later on in the dynasty.
And there's two really interesting, I don't know if they're laws or edicts that are very important in your book to set up the premise of it. And one of them is this spinster law, where all unmarried women had to get married, which is different from in Pride and Prejudice. It's like, oh, I have 5 daughters and I hope I find husbands. But in this, it's like, you have to. So your main character, she's an older sister who is not married, and I think she's 24 and so she's considered a spinster, and there's this law, like so there's different added pressure on this, not just like culturally, I hope you get married, but this is like, you have to, it's a law. Can you explain what that law was?
Yes. So this law was enforced not all throughout the period. It only happened when there were like natural disasters like droughts. So there was this Confucian belief that when some like disasters occur in nature, it is a reflection that the king isn't doing his job and that the people are angry. And somehow they connected the drought in the 1790s to spinsters not getting married and that they were angry about it. And so the king felt like the government basically felt like it was their duty to get the spinsters married. And if they got married off, then the drought would end. That was the real belief back then. And so I found like articles after articles detailing how this policy was enforced. So in Seoul, back then it was called Hanyang. So this is the capital of Korea right now. And basically in the capital, they rounded up around 281 spinsters. And so initially, the government officials didn't like take it that seriously. They were like trying to matchmake. And if there were a few people who didn't get married, they're like, yeah, like whatever. But then the king got so angry. He's like, he just fired them. And he's like, do better. And so in the end, everyone got married. I don't know how the 281, it's like an odd number, but yeah, everyone got married off in the end.
And then the other edict or law or rule that's happening at the same time that really spearheads the premise of your book and the action of it is the rule about not having fiction novels. So what's that about?
So that is called, the modern term for that policy is called 문체반장. And it's a very complicated policy, but I'll simplify it. But basically, King Jeongjo had a distaste for novels for various reasons. But basically, the king believed that writing is a reflection of our culture. And the more, quote unquote, trashy a writing gets, it's a reflection that society is deteriorating. And so he felt like in order to create an upstanding society, you need writing that is very moral and very in line with the Confucian classics. And so during this time, people were really getting into novels. And King Jeongjo actually read these novels and he was just like really scandalized by them. And so he banned writing. fiction writing, especially because he found that fiction, it's really tricky to monitor what kind of ideas are being spread when it comes to fiction. And during this time, Catholicism was becoming a big problem in Joseon society. And the king was worried that, you might find, like, writers might kind of sneak Catholic ideas into novels and hide it in fiction. So he was trying to basically control what kind of ideas were spreading in the country. And so that is one of the many reasons why novels and fiction writing were banned. And I found it really interesting because I feel like it's really relevant to today, not only because of book banning, but you see the discourse around romance novels. Like, people will be like, oh, it's so trashy, or like romantasy, so trashy. And basically it's like censoring that. Those kind of conversations are like censoring, like, what do you think make a good book? And so I feel like it's been, this kind of discourse has been going on for ages, like, and globally, trying to censor, basically monitor what women read and what they enjoy. So I found that really interesting.
I found this is an era that I didn't know anything about, and these rules are so, they're so specific and interesting. And then it sets up the world for your characters, where they're, like, I'm sure in actual historical cultures, fiction was banned, but people still found a way to read it and to write it. So the premise of your book has this kind of, there's just like a bookstore, but then there's a secret back part of the bookstore where there's kind of these other books, but only trusted customers can go there. And so can you explain about the role of the transcriptionist in this context?
So during this time, the printing press was monopolized by the government. So the common people didn't have a printing press. So they would basically have to transcribe the books by hand. And so, yeah, it was like, that was the only way to have extra copies of a book, was by transcribing.
And so you have a character in your book who, well, then it also becomes a thing about whose handwriting is this.
Yes.
And when they're trying to figure out who's writing these novels. So with all of that set up, can you explain who the main characters, the Lizzie and Darcy in your book are?
So the main character for Lizzie is Haewon, and she is a transcriber of forbidden books. And basically, back then, transcribing books, that's a way to make money. And so because her family isn't so well off, she's like, it's a great way to make extra income by transcribing. And then one of her favorite authors his pseudonym is Black Lotus, because back then almost all authors wrote under pseudonyms. And Black Lotus later on turns out to be Darcy, the Korean Darcy, and his name is Seo-jun. And he is a writer of these adventure novels, but he has to write secretly because he comes from a very respectable family and he doesn't want to be caught. Too much is at stake.
So there's a touch of, like, you've got mail in this as well.
Yes.
Because the two of them know each other through letters, but they don't know each other's real identity.
Exactly.
I loved, when I was reading the book, knowing that it was I feel like even if I didn't know going into it, it was a Pride and Prejudice retelling, I would have figured it out.
Yeah.
Eventually, I'm just like, wait a minute. And she's got kind of this older sister who's really pretty, but kind of reserved. And she meets this kind of nice, but kind of dumb guy. And then she has this younger sister who's kind of wild. I'm like, wait a minute. And then I don't want to spoil anything, but I will say that if you're a fan of the 1995 version, the 2005 version, I have to presume some of the things that happen in this book are homages to some iconic moments. Am I correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like a body of water is involved.
Yes. You
had to.
Subverted it a bit.
Hands touching does occur. You can picture it flexing afterwards. Was that, it must have just been a delight. Was it a delight for you to think about what are your favorite moments from Pride and Prejudice and how to incorporate them into this story in this different context?
Oh, yes. I enjoyed it so much. I had so much fun trying to figure out how to like take iconic scenes from the adaptations, but also the book, and how to incorporate it into a Joseon Dynasty setting. It was so challenging, but that's why I enjoyed it so much because, for example, there were no balls back then. Men and women weren't allowed to even associate. And so I was just like, I had to come up with ideas there. And I think what was tricky was I think there are so many things, elements in Pride and Prejudice that I think are crucial. Things like Mr. Collins and that the letter that Darcy gives to Elizabeth after his famous first proposal. But no matter how crucial I found them to be, I just had no space in my book to add them in without bogging the story down. And so the question that I had to wrestle with was, what do I think is necessary to kind of capture the spirit of Pride and Prejudice without bogging the story down? And so if there were elements I couldn't really take, I would find ways to kind of amalgamate them in different ways. So for example, the antagonist in my book, he's a little bit of Wickham, but also a little bit Mr. Collins. And for the letter that Darcy gives Elizabeth, I don't have that. I didn't have that scene. But instead, I was like, let's just have them writing letters throughout the book as pen pals. So I found different ways to, pay homage to the book without being a direct kind of scene for scene retelling.
And it's such a treat for people. Honestly, if you don't know Pride and Prejudice, you're still going to love this book, of course. But if you do, you're going to be like, I see what you did. I see what you did. It's just fun to spot these things. And I also appreciate like the way you've described the culture. Like men and women were kept so separate. And so I feel like it was probably a challenge, but maybe a fun challenge to be like, how can you get these two to have private moments together? And you find a lot of really interesting ways.
Yes. Yep. I remember it's like, you know how they spent like a few weeks, I think, at Netherfield when Jane got sick, but I'm like, how do I do that? Like, she's not like the sister in my book. She's not allowed to stay in the home of like a guy who's not related to her. And so I had to like kind of find a workaround it where it's still a little bit scandalous, but not like reputation ruining. So yeah, I had to figure. It was a lot of jumping hoops. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is what your book just made me think about and realize, like how there were so many strict rules in Regency era London for like the high society people, obviously, but there's also a lot of flexibility and gray area in that, like if you're wealthy enough and if you have the right friends, they can kind of be like, oh yeah, but it's fine.
Yeah.
Versus like in the context of like 1793 Joseon Dynasty, it's like these are the rules and they have to be followed. So I thought it was interesting. Like you're saying, it just kind of raises the stakes where it's like, I'm not giving any spoilers for your book, but you're like if Lydia Bennet runs away in Pride and Prejudice, it's like, oh no, our family is ruined, but no one's going to be killed.
Yeah.
And like, this is bad. And like, maybe you're going to like lose money and, you know, you won't get as advantageous marriages and that's terrible. But like in your book, it's like, if the Lydia equivalent, like if that happened, it's like, oh, now like we're disgraced forever. Our lineage is destroyed. Like someone's going to be executed. Like the stakes are just higher because the rules are taken more seriously.
And that's why I had fun writing.
Exactly. And that's why I feel like, but it is still fun. I want people to know that. Like these are the rules, but I love everything in the book that's about being a reader and being a writer and the importance of novels. Like I feel like when you were talking about when you were younger and you're like, I just had to write this fan fiction. Like the writer character in your book says something similar where it's just like, I'm just riding this wave of creativity. Like I can't stop it. Like this book is such a good, fun, like ode to just people who love reading or people who love writing. Yes. I think it really hits on those points too.
Yeah. I just wanted to like, not just, because I think Pride and Prejudice wasn't just a book that I loved. It was the book that introduced me to the love of reading and writing. And so I think I wanted to capture all of that. And so I ended up with a writer and a transcriber and a homage to Pride and Prejudice.
And it's such a fun book, everybody. Just so you know, I was telling June before we started recording, I was reading it yesterday before we recorded this because I wanted to and because I wanted to be ready. And I was just like, I was so swept up in it. Like you were describing being swept up in the Jane Austen book. I was just like, I was in this world. I'm just like, I didn't know any of these rules or this culture or this society, but I'm just like, what's going to happen? Are they going to figure this out? Are they going to get together? Like the stakes are right there.
I love that you felt that even though you knew it's like almost it's a loose retelling of Pride and Prejudice, and yet you felt that. That makes me very happy to hear.
I'm like, there's no way around these insurmountable obstacles. There's no way. But reader, like listeners, there is. They figure it out. It is, like you're saying, the comfort you find in Jane Austen.
Yes.
That's part of it. So Behind Five Willows, it's out this week everywhere, and you've got so many events coming up. How can people keep up with you, and just where are you going to be and what are you going to be doing?
So I'll be doing a few events, mostly in Ontario, Canada. And if you follow me on June H Writes on Instagram, you'll see all the news and updates there.
Fantastic. And I hope it's such a fun, I think this will be a fun book for you to be doing events about, because the book is just an homage to reading and the love of reading. And I think it'll be just really, I feel like people will be so excited to share in the joy of this book. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation. So June Hur's book is out now everywhere. Behind Five Willows, like get into it. And I feel like this would be a great K-drama adaptation. If any producers are out there listening, like there's a lot of very like, I can picture the cinema Yay. Of some of these scenes. I think would be really beautiful. Thank you so much for joining me, June.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure talking with you.
So I can't recommend enough to read June Hur's new book, Behind Five Willows. And once you've read that, like honestly, read her previous books. It's so interesting. The time periods that she finds are so specific in Joseon history, and just kind of who was the emperor and what were the laws and what was happening. I've learned so much about Korean history from reading her historical novels. And honestly, the romance plotlines in her previous books are like pretty good. This one, Behind Five Willows, if you're into yearning, like watch out. So good. Keep an eye out for her if you're in Toronto or area for some of her events that she has coming up. And I also wrote a book. It's called Rebel of the Regency, The Scandalous Saga of Caroline of Brunswick, Britain's Queen Without a Crown. It is now officially available in North America and also in Europe. It took a minute for it to arrive in Europe, but it should be there. In the UK specifically, I know you guys have been waiting. Ireland, check out, go to your local bookstore. Hopefully it's there. If it's there, send me a picture, please, because I want to see it. If you see my book there in the store, send a picture to me at, DM me at my Instagram at Vulgar History Pod. And I'm also running a fundraiser right now. So we were talking about the Regency era and how it was a more diverse and interesting time period than one might imagine from how it's often romanticized today. And one of the ways that it was a diverse and more interesting time period is there was a lot of queer people in the Regency era, as we've talked about throughout this series here on Vulgar History. And so to celebrate the various queer figures who we've talked about who were around in the Regency era, I've got a fundraiser going right now for the Trevor Project, which is a wonderful American organization that provides 24/7. It's a suicide help hotline for LGBT people, especially youth. And so this money goes to support all the important work that they do. And if you want to support my fundraiser, I have this t-shirt that we're selling. So it's a beautiful artwork designed by a friend of the podcast, Jan Pater, featuring all the queer-coded people from Vulgar History this season. So we're talking about Chevalier Dayon, Mary Shelley, Mary Wollstonecraft, Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, Anne Lister is there. The ladies of Llangollen and their cat, Sappho, are all featured in this beautiful design that's called the Regency Era, because the Regency era was queer AF, and everybody should know that. So it's a beautiful ringer tee. It's like a white t-shirt with a red or a blue or a black cuffs and neckline. It looks gorgeous. And all the profits from sales of this t-shirt are going to go to support the Trevor Project. So if you're going to get one of these t-shirts, you can get it at vulgarhistory.com/Trevor. That's vulgarhistory.com/TREVOR to support our fundraiser. And we're in this is like the Regency era has been quite a time for us all. We're moving into sort of a between the seasons time. I've got so many interesting episodes coming up for you with some guests you're going to be really excited about and to hear from. And that's going to be what next week's episode is. When you see who this guest is, you're going to lose your minds. It's a really, 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 it's a hero of mine. And I'm really excited to have her on the show. That's coming up next week. And until I'm ready to let you know about what the next season's theme is, we're just sitting here in this beautiful moment. Thanks for joining me on this Regency Era journée. And until next time, keep your pants on and your tits out. Vulgar History is researched, scripted, and hosted by Anne Foster. Editor is Christina Lumagi. Theme music is by the Severn Duo. Regency Era artwork by Karen Moynihan. Social media videos by Magdalena Denson. Transcripts of this podcast are available at vulgarhistory.com by Aveline Malik. You can get early, ad-free episodes of Vulgar History by becoming a paid member of our Patreon at patreon.com/AnneFosterWriter. Vulgar History merchandise is available at vulgarhistory.com/store for Americans and at vulgarhistory.redbubble.com for everyone else. Follow us on social media at vulgarhistorypod. Get in touch with me at vulgarhistorypod@gmail.com.
Legendary stories, awe-inspiring sound, and endless adventure. Welcome to the realms of peril and glory. Explore the mechanically magical vistas of Vale, the paranormal mysteries of liminal London, and the cyberpunk chaos of Cyborg. Fall in love with our core cast, or be awed by our incredible guests from familiar shows like Oxventure, Three Black Halflings, and No Rolls Barred. Ignite your imagination and discover the realms of peril and glory today. Go to realmspod.com or search Realms of Peril and Glory wherever you listen to podcasts.
Goodbye, Kyle!
Did the sound of those words call to you like Pavlov's dog? Then you might enjoy our podcast, Turtle Time.
Every week, you can join me, Riley Hamilton, and my co-host, Amy Scarlatta, as we cover the most pressing Bravo news and dig into the new episodes to answer important questions like, who the hell is Adrian Malouf in this world?
Listen to Turtle Time on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes every Wednesday and Friday.
Oh, please, not that music. That music gives me nightmares from my childhood.
Could we get something a little bit lighter, some lighter music here?
Are you a fan of true crime TV shows?
And what about Unsolved Mysteries, the show that jump-started all of our love of true crime?
I'm Ellen Marsh.
And I'm Joey Taranto.
And we host I Think Not, a true crime comedy podcast covering some of the wildest stories from your favorite true crime campy TV shows all the way to Unsolved Mysteries.
Baby, you will laugh, you will cry, you'll think about true crime in a whole new way, and you'll also ask yourself, who gave these people mics?
New episodes of I Think Not are released every Wednesday with bonus episodes out every Thursday on Patreon.
And every Monday, you can listen to our True Crime Rundown, where we go over the top true crime headlines of the week.
So come and join us wherever you listen to your podcasts.